Welcome back into 49ers Access. My name is Sterling Bennett, and today we're going to talk about the possibility of the San Francisco 49ers being on NFL Hard Knocks in 2025. And I know when you hear that and you think of what Kyle Shanahan actually opened the doors of Niners HQ out there in Santa Clara at Levi's Stadium to camera crews and the NFL media more than he actually has to do per the NFL rulebook, the answer is no. That is out of Kyle Shanahan's rulebook. That is nothing. Like, Shanahan wants nothing to do with giving the media more access to his team, the franchise, and even himself. But it seems like the door may be a little ajar for the NFL to sneak in and film what could be NFL Hard Knocks in 2025, according to the San Francisco Standard's Tim Kawakami. The Niners could be involved in an NFC West in-season version of Hard Knocks, just like they did last year with the AFC Central. Last year it was the Browns, the Ravens, the Steelers, and the Bengals. According to Kawakami, the Niners are at least, maybe not in conversations, but the NFL is having those discussions as to, hey, could we cover the NFC West in 2025? And again, would Kyle Shanahan actually say yes to this? The odds are not very high. Kyle Shanahan, if you've been there during the meetings or to simply watch the press conferences on YouTube or X, you can see Shanahan doesn't like talking to the media. He does not like giving anybody, reporters, the fans, even his own players at times, any more information than he has to. He's very coy. He's sometimes arrogant, sometimes stubborn, and sometimes simply just will not answer your questions and will even often laugh at reporters for saying dumb questions. Somebody asked him, Kyle, you run the West Coast offense, and Kyle interrupts the reporter and says, I don't run the West Coast offense. That's who you're dealing with here, with the guy making decisions at the top of the San Francisco 49ers. So the NFL, even if they approached Shanahan to say, hey, Kyle, let's come in during the year. It'll be less distractions. We're not going to come during training camp, not going to come during OTAs or preseason, but weeks 1 through 18 for a short period of time, we'll be here. It'll be a smaller camera crew for filming 4 teams. It'll be 1 to 2 people maybe in the room with you guys almost at all times. Shanahan would run somebody off of the facilities out there in Santa Clara. There was one time at training camp where the NFL had one of their members, one of their safety people at Niners practice saying, I don't know what happened. I was there on the sideline, but Kyle ripped into former Colts tight end Dwayne Allen, who now works for the NFL, or at least did at the time, and was like, get off the practice field. I have no idea who you are. And it was a big deal as to they paused practice to almost have and let Shanahan run off, who he didn't know at the time who it was, this random stranger trying to halt their practice. So Shanahan runs hot at times, and is somebody that if you approached him with the idea of doing Hard Knocks, it's a hard no. In fact, it's almost like don't even ask Kyle about it because you know the answer will simply be no. But it's not going to be an off-season training camp OTAs type of Hard Knocks. It'll be an in-season Hard Knocks, which I think changes everything when it comes to the conversation with Kyle Shanahan. I think that Kyle has been a little more open to having camera crews follow around players during the season. A couple of years ago now, they were following around George Kittle and Deebo Samuel for Netflix's wide receiver. They didn't seem to have a problem with that from what we know. Obviously, Kyle wasn't involved in that by any means. He was just there with the B-roll they got during games and practices. But he doesn't really seem to have an issue with being on camera, but he does not want to be the one questioned or being, approached for certain interviews or whatnot. That said, I do think San Francisco is so tight-lipped, so close to the vest that the access they give the NFL will be pretty slim. You're not going to get the New York Giants in their draft room or during the offseason, cutting or not re-signing Saquon Barkley and see kind of the agony with GM Joe Shane out there in New York. You're going to have a less less insight, if you will. You're not going to have those insane moments of Kyle just breaking down in his office, or these intel meetings they're having before or after games, or talking about free agent signings or whatnot. You're not going to get the insight as to what it looked like, during a Deebo Samuel trade or the Brandon Aiyuk negotiations. You'll get a much, much, much withdrawn version of the San Francisco 49ers. But with that said, let's say Kyle is forced to say yes. The NFL says, look, dude, we're doing it in the NFC West. It's not going to be a big deal for you. It'll be, not a distraction. You're not going to have cameras and flashing lights all over the place. It'll be in season. It's not going to be distracting rookie players or anybody else. It'll simply just be us in meetings talking to people after they're done, or getting one guy here or there for interviews. It's not going to be a big deal. You are not the only team being focused on here. Similar to wide receiver when they had Devontae Adams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Kittle, Deebo, and a couple other guys out there being covered. Kind of like that, where it's like, hey, you are one piece of a much bigger puzzle. That to me is more something Shanahan may sign off on. So with that in mind, I thought, what could be the top 5 or 6 key storylines that the NFL would cover on an in-season version of Hard Knocks covering the San Francisco 49er? Tell me down below what you'd want to see Hard Knocks cover this year if they happen to get the NFC West and Kyle signs off on it, with the San Francisco 49ers being 1/4 of their coverage. But my first, and I think the most obvious coverage story would be, the big headline to follow would be the San Francisco 49ers quest for 6. This team has been in the Super Bowl 3 times in the last 20 years, and they've yet to win either time in heartbreaking fashion. Each loss has come and gone, and San Francisco is still trying to find that 6th Super Bowl title, the first one since, 1995, if you want to call it that, against the Chargers, the 94 season, 95 Super Bowl. And that, to me, is the big storyline here. Can San Francisco finally get over the hump and win a Super Bowl? But on top of that, kind of included in that conversation, you have the bigger question. Can Kyle Shanahan finally get over the hump? You talk about Kyle Shanahan, it is like right next to his name, following him like a black cloud over his head. Shanahan, great coach, great offensive scheme. He's a player's coach, but over his head, he is yet to win a Super Bowl, continues to blow big games after big games. Going back to Atlanta, his 3rd year in San Francisco. You can talk about the NFC Championship game against the Los Angeles Rams in 2021. You can, of course, get back into the 2022 NFC Championship game where Brock Purdy tore his UCL, or even get into 2023 where they lost in overtime for a lot of reasons, but one of those being the coaching staff didn't know the overtime rules and didn't prepare for them very well. A lot of things can be discussed in this. This may be the one where you aren't going to get Kyle involved in interviews, and you may get a much broader discussion being had in the coverage of NFL Hard Knocks, but I think it's the big one. You talk about Kyle Shanahan's tenure in San Francisco. It's a lot of hits, but it's the really big misses. It's, Barry Bonds in the playoffs until 2002 when they went all the way to the World Series and lost, and he was the only person coming together for them in the World Series against the Angels. This is very similar to that. It's a player that, or actually, it's a coach that is yet to find his stride in the Super Bowl, where he has a lead for, 3.5 quarters. In the last 10 minutes, it just falls apart in front of him. It's almost like he's baking a cake and he gets it out of the oven. You go, wow, here it comes. It's beautiful. And on the way to the table, it just flops over and you're like, wow, what a mess. I thought it was over with. Thought it was in the bag. That to me is the first storyline Hard Knocks would probably follow. San Francisco's quest for 6, and can Kyle Shanahan finally get over the hump and win a Super Bowl? The next one, probably, I think a lot of fans' first choice of a storyline for San Francisco would be the Brock Purdy play after getting a massive contract extension this offseason. You can maybe put George Kittle getting a new deal in this as well, but that'd be a much smaller piece of this because all eyes are going to be on Brock Purdy and have pretty much been on Brock Purdy ever since this team traded away Deebo Samuel this offseason as to the big storylines to follow when there is no Hard Knocks there. But once Hard Knocks, if they do come to San Francisco this year, it'll be, hey, you got $50+ million a year. How is Brock Purdy playing? So that to me is another big one for them. It'll be a week by week thing with Brock. There's a lot of fans that don't think Brock deserves a big contract. A lot of fans out there who think Brock really does deserve a big contract. And so you'll have some contentions, they'll have some fans going back and forth bickering, and it'll be a storyline followed by fans and the team all year long. However, you also are going to see, if they do cover the Niners and Hard Knocks, that's going to be a major leading headline for them, especially in the NFC West where the new quarterbacks are Darnold. That's the only new one. You have Kyler, but Kyler's kind of boring outside of the Call of Duty stuff he got kind of busted for a couple years ago. Then Matthew Stafford, nobody cares about him. Like, he's a quiet guy. His wife is a much bigger storyline than he is, whereas Brock Purdy is getting a new contract in a contract season and is probably going to become a top 5, top 10 paid highest quarterback in football. So that'll be the second biggest storyline to follow. And I think Brock would actually be a really good interview for Hard Knocks, and to see the insight and also give the wider range, the wider scope of NFL fans more insight into actually who Brock Purdy is. And he may actually gain some more fans. And Brock has a lot already, being, a former Mr. Relevant. People just love the underdog story, but they don't really know who Brock is and is like, behind the scenes. And so I think getting that insight, you'll have Brock Purdy gaining a lot more fans, and you'll see maybe some players that are staunchly against Brock Purdy getting a big deal, maybe see those guys come around if you can compare that with his play this season. The number 3 storyline I think Hard Knocks could follow this year is a pretty big one as well. That is the return of Robert Saleh to San Francisco, and in company with the defensive makeover, including this year's 2025 draft class: Micah Williams, CJ West, Alfred Collins, Upton Stout, Marquis Siegel, and Nicholas Martin. A bunch of new guys are in there. You brought back Robert Saleh. Talanoa Hufunga's gone. Leonard Floyd's gone. Malik Collins is gone. And the big one, Dre Greenlaw, is no longer in town. That, to me, is a really big storyline to follow. Obviously, it wouldn't be in OTAs and training camp and all that stuff, but you want to cover Robert Saleh's first game back against Seattle on the road. You want to have, Niners and Rams out there at SoFi, Thursday Night Football. Those are games you want to cover. Those are big ones. And they have Jacksonville, week 4 of the season. That's a game, or that's a game where, Saleh was almost the Jaguars head coach this season had they not brought in Liam Cohen, who kind of got swiped under the Buccaneers' noses. That's a big storyline to follow. I think that it'd be a pretty good one. I think Robert would be a really good interview. He's already adorned by fans out here in San Francisco, and New York, maybe it's a different story, but I think it'd be pretty cool. Saleh comes back. It's a return. It's the only place he said he was willing to take a defensive coordinator job, felt kind of endowed and kind of indebted to this organization to come back and be their DC and kind of save them, if you will. And so they kind of gave him the keys of the draft, and that's a big ask of him, but also that's a pretty neat storyline to cover if you are Hard Knocks. So without knowing who else the NFL is, kind of looking to cover during the in-season version of Hard Knocks, without being biased, it's really hard to say San Francisco isn't one of the most intriguing options for them. Mainly because, 6-11 last year, a lot of guys injured, a lot of guys hurt, quarterback coming in on a big contract once he gets paid, Kyle Shanahan's redemption maybe. And the next kind of grouping of that is this defensive class coming in, paired with Nick Bosa and Fred Warner. You can kind of cover the departures and the additions along with Robert Saleh being back in San Francisco. The next 2 storylines I have is one that maybe isn't the best for an in-season version of Hard Knocks, but I think could actually give you a really nice kind of, underdog or kind of comeback story, if you will. That is the return and recovery of Brandon Aiyuk. Last year, destroyed his knee after the long contract negotiations and kind of the debacle that was. But he's recovering. There's like an outside chance he may be back by week 1. I don't see that. But I think if you want a player to cover, Deebo Samuel's gone. Kittle is Kittle, but he already got his big contract. You want a major storyline to cover, kind of a through line throughout the entire year. That is the recovery and return of Brandon Aiyuk during the season. I think week 10 against the Rams at home is like the choice game you wanted to come back. That's the kind of circled return date on the calendar for them for BA to return this season. Gives him 7 games to prove he's healthy and recover and hopefully be ready for the playoffs and maybe even improve his trade stock for next offseason. But I think, seeing Aiyuk in rehab, talking to him, he's already vlogging every single day. It seems like he's gotten Pearsall in on that too. So this could be kind of a receiver room discussion, but also branch off into a more in-depth Brandon Aiyuk recovery storyline for Hard Knocks. And accompanied with that is the returns of older players like Christian McCaffrey and Trent Williams off of injuries. Christian McCaffrey, Madden cover player, offensive player of the year a couple years ago now. When he's healthy, he is, if not one of the most dynamic offensive players in football. And you have a team that is banking on him being healthy again in 2025. You hear how Kubiak talked about him. You hear how Christian's already out there working out, and they drafted a running back. They have Grendo, but this team never really loves running back by committee. So if CMC's healthy and not worn down, he's going to get a lion's share of those carries, and you may get into a conversation as to how much is too much for a player like Christian McCaffrey off bilateral Achilles tendonitis and a PCL tear. He says he's healthy, and I hope that's true. For my case, covering the team, hope it's true. For his case and his health, hope that's true. Going to be a father soon. Maybe he has dad's strength now. Who knows, right? But I think watching Christian McCaffrey's return and kind of detailing the impact he's had on the team and the offense from 2022 up until now, only been here for 3 seasons going into his 4th year, if you will. And so detailing those kind of storylines, those steps, how McCaffrey got, acquired in San Francisco, his recovery from last year's injuries and kind of what that meant for him and hopefully his broader success during the year. And paired with that, to me, you can get into kind of swan song territory as to, will he retire? Will he not retire? That is the return of Trent Williams. We know Trent last year had some off-the-field tragedy, losing his stillborn son. Then you pair that with the ankle injury. He didn't play almost the entire second half of last season. Obviously, the record was so bad, they weren't going to ask him to come back, especially after that heartbreaking loss against the Rams at home, 12-6 in Thursday Night Football. But 37 years old, left tackle. San Francisco did not address left tackle in the NFL draft. And now there's kind of mixed reporting as to DJ Humphries may or may not be signed in San Francisco. So there really isn't that much protection behind him unless you really like Andre Dillard, which I talked to some Titans people and I would not if I were you. But I think you can get into kind of is this Trent's final year in San Francisco? Is this the end of the line for a player like Trent Williams? And with one of the weakest schedules in football, you can kind of get into that last dance for Trent with his NFL career, Hall of Famer, going to wear a gold jacket one day, but is this his last chance to win a Super Bowl? I think, while Trent may push back on that during the year, I think there's some real consideration being had as to, hey, this could be it for me. I'd like to walk once I'm done. And I know Trent says he wants to play till he's 40, but if one more injury happens, you never know. And the ankle really, really, really is a big issue for him. So I think detailing the returns and recoveries of Aiyuk, McCaffrey, and Trent Williams are 2 of the 3 bigger storylines you can follow for kind of the, maybe not like the top, not the 1A storylines. That is Shanahan, Super Bowl, Purdy extension, and Saleh's return. But kind of the smaller kind of filler episodes, I think, could be Aiyuk, CMC, and Trent Williams' return and recoveries. And look, that's 5 storylines that I think NFL Hard Knocks could cover for the San Francisco 49ers. That may be, what you want to see from an off-season into the year kind of documentary style with San Francisco. But in season, I think there's plenty of content, and I would not be shocked to hear Kyle say, nope, not doing it. But I also wouldn't be shocked to hear the NFL kind of saying, hey, look, we're going to twist your hand somewhat and say, look, sorry, you are one of the most intriguing teams we can cover. We haven't covered the NFC West for a long time. I think San Francisco is in prime position to be covered by the NFL and Hard Knocks this season. And by the storylines I kind of drummed up off the top of my head, it's a pretty interesting 8 episodes they can give you if they only covered San Francisco. Weed that in with the Cardinals, the Rams, and the Seahawks. That's a lot of great content for the NFL, barring Kyle Shanahan signing off. But I like to think the NFL may be twisting Kyle Shanahan's hand to a certain extent to get them in the building and get them more access to what actually happens out there in Santa Clara. But maybe some fans don't want that. Tell me down below, do you want more insight into the San Francisco 49ers, or do you want a drama-free season, less is more kind of approach to this year? It's a must-win year for San Francisco. 6-11 last year, walking into having the easiest schedule in all of football. They got to win something, whether it's the NFC West or get into the playoffs once again. Do you want to see this team back on Hard Knocks or being covered that way by the NFL? Or are you saying, no, keep any form of distractions out of the building? Tell me down below in the comments. And if San Francisco happens to get picked by the NFL for Hard Knocks, whether it is during OTAs and training camp and preseason or the in-season version of it, give me some storylines you want to see them cover for the San Francisco 49ers during Hard Knocks of the 2025 NFL season. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe on the audio podcasting platforms. Give us that 5-star review. And with the NFL schedule dropping yesterday, we have 17 games ahead of us for your San Francisco 49ers in 2025. So don't forget to use promo code 49ers Access, 49 ERSACCESS at SeatGeek.com. You can save yourself $20 off your first purchase. That's all I have for you today. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Leave us that 5-star audio podcasting review. And until next time, my name is Sterling Bennett, and stay faithful.